In 5th place, I've put the final fight on the Nautiloid. And this is because it's kind of the first major fight with more than just a couple of easy to kill things, and there's a lovely little cutscene to it as well. And in this fight, we're not one of the big boys, and there's actually another objective apart from just killing everything, although that is still an option if you want to do that. We're introduced to some of the big baddies and are shown that they are generally way too powerful for us, at least at level 1, and at least if you fight fairly. There are also some bonus things in the fight, such as the Everburn Blade, the first magic weapon that can be found, extra experience for killing or getting the last hit on the Illithid, and some extra consumables if you're able and willing to look around. The timer adds a sense of urgency, although 15 turns is quite a lot compared to how long most fights will usually take in the game. That, along with the orders from the Illithid, add to the tension in the fight. And it's possible to have an extra companion with you already in the form of an intellect devourer as well. Although that isn't directly from this fight, it adds something extra to the fight. Unfortunately, most fights after this are mostly as simple as kill all enemies, and it seems like this first fight didn't really lead the way in introducing different objectives to these different encounters. Although some people do say kind of it's a bit too much to do right from the beginning, that we're in the astral plane on a Nautiloid, which is rare enough as it is. We've got mind flayers and devils, like Cambions are around. I kind of think it's a nice high octane start to the game. You do eventually end up somewhere a bit more calm, but it really gets you going. In 4th place, I've put the Goblin Camp. No, it's not really fair to count this as a single fight. However, at the end of the day, this is my own video following my own made up rules and ideas, so I'm gonna stick with it. I will deal with this in 2 stages though, because there are 2 completely separated areas, namely the outer courtyard area and inside the abandoned temple itself. I'm going to start with the outside, since it's the area you first come across, unless you somehow decide to completely ignore it. First of all, there's no one particular way to start a fight here, and in fact you can completely ignore this section if you want to at first. Even after killing Dror-Ragzlin, you can either continue through to the Underdark or simply teleport out to a waypoint that isn't inside the Goblin Camp. You might find yourself doing the fight outside the temple after you've done the inside, since the Goblin Camp only turns completely 100% hostile once Dror-Ragzlin is dead. This is actually quite an interesting way to do the fight here, because you have the horde of goblins coming at you and you get to blast away with your area of effect spells and abilities, and this is one of the reasons I love this fight, because we get to pulverize puny little goblins for the most part, and if you do this area at level 5 it becomes child's play. You can also try to be tactical out here and get to the high ground and destroy the ladder you used to get up there even. There's more than one area that has high ground, and the fight kind of really shows why focusing on 1 or 2 enemies at a time is the way to go when you've got to get rid of so many enemies. For each enemy you kill, you've got 1 less attack coming your way. You can also try to be sneaky and poison the booze tub, which then kills off a good portion of the goblins, which I always find satisfying. Then on the inside of the temple, there are 3 bosses, 2 of which can be taken care of either discreetly, Gut, you are far too trusting, or sent away on another mission. More on that later. Sizing up against Dror-Ragzlin can be a little bit difficult. However, once again, there are some places up high to make use of the verticality in the game. Thank you, old temples, and having beams near the ceiling. Outside of maybe the owlbear, this is possibly the first place where you will encounter some bosses, so it's one of the first big tests for your characters. Also, let's not forget the fact that you can go and save a bear and temporarily recruit a lovely druid into your party to help turn those goblin cultists into mulch. All of that on top of a trader, a victim or 2 to save, and a totally not creepy self-flagellator. We can find a helpful hand in the event we get caught, a heretical goblin, and plenty of loot to boot. In 3rd place, and I think it would be remiss of me to leave out the biggest automaton in Act 1 and not to mention Grim. I find his name fitting, to be honest, because things really can become grim if you're not careful in this fight. Once again, one of the reasons I like this fight is because of the various methods of dealing with this, such as owlbear from top rope, using minor illusion to distract Grim from above and then throwing something and smashing that hammer down, using the hammer from down below, or just going all in on bludgeoning damage and just beating the damn machine, because that's how Karlach wants to solve her problems. At the point in the game that you would usually do this fight, Grim would be the biggest single enemy you would have faced, and it seems like I enjoy facing the big baddies more than the grunts out on the field. The arena, which I think is the most appropriate word here, also provides a massive hazard by itself, and will test your ability to move around and coordinate your team, which, if you're going to use a gigantic hammer hovering above you, you'll certainly have to do, considering that Grim targets the last character to take aim at it. However, I do have to say that the magma methods that spawn annoy me to no end, since they spam heat metal and spew hot magma in your face when you finish them off. Usually though, I either have a spellcaster with Glyph of Warding or ranged martial characters sniping them off one after the other. Also, we get a decent heavy helmet, and then we get the ability to craft 2 pieces of adamantine equipment, which, if you didn't know, can be the same piece twice, so it feels like we're rewarded fairly for the effort of getting rid of Grim. So overall, we have a boss battle that feels kind of epic, has great music, and has a fitting introductory cutscene. For my second favourite fight, I'm going for the hag fight in the tea house, and I don't mean where you first meet her, but down deep in her cave where all fear to explore. So by the time you fight her for the last time in Act 1, you know that she's a hag, and you should probably have an inkling that she won't go down without a fight. She's one of the few spellcasting bosses in Act 1, and she is all the more dangerous for it. And kind of linked to that, I really like how she has some unique spells and abilities, which for the first time you fight her, if you've never fought her before, it's your first time in the game, they can be very worrying indeed. However, what I like about this fight is that if you're very careful and observant, you can spot which of her clones are fake and which Mayrina is the real Mayrina and should please stand up. This fight is also a great place to put some of your consumables into use, such as spike bulbs, void bulbs, and alchemist's fire to get rid of her clones. Remember, you only need to do a single point of damage to get rid of a clone, and in Honor mode at least, casting spells often ends up making life more difficult than it was before, so magic missile kind of goes out the window. She also potentially gives us one of the most coveted consumables in the game, her hair. Yummy! And while that is a good reward, what I actually find more interesting and compelling about this fight is that she's one of the few, if only, enemy characters who starts a conversation during the fight to beg for her life. I think this should happen just a bit more frequently, as most people, or at least I assume, would rather not fight to the death if it can be helped. Something to add on to this is that you get the choice of how to deal with her should she initiate that conversation also. As before, another boss made it onto my list, and although this fight isn't as, let's say, epic as my previous entry, I do think it's that little bit cleverer because we also have to worry, or not worry, your choice, about Mayrina. This harkens back to my first entry, where I like it when there is something more to do than simply kill all enemies. I'm going to give an honourable mention to the Githyanki Kresh at this moment. I didn't know the joy it would bring me to slaughter my way through a bunch of arrogant, violent characters. Most of the fights inside the Kresh are kind of similar though, because you have a lot of the same Githyanki there, which does tend to make it a little bit monotonous after a while, although there is the good old Inquisitor Wargaz to take care of if you're interested in having a good old scrap. And in first place, I've put the Grove Defense / Slaughter. One of the reasons that this fight is here is partially because it's an easy to miss fight. It's not one that you'll necessarily do every time you go through the game, especially if you've gone guns blazing when entering the Goblin camp. Second thing is we get to choose which side of the fight we join. So if slaughtering innocent civilians is your sort of thing, then this fight has you covered. Be warned though, you have to look Zephlor right in the face as you reveal your treachery, which is probably harder than you might imagine. I prefer being on the defending side of this fight though, and I think that's probably down to the epic defense of the Hornburg in the Lord of the Rings, which is also known as Helm's Deep in the films. Obviously, the scale of the defense of the Grove is nothing like that, but the idea that I'm part of the last line of defense and that this is effectively a last stand for both the Druids and Tieflings makes this battle mean something more than just the survival of my party. Also, I like blowing the horn at the gate, and not just for the extra temporary hit points. It turns out I'm a bit of a sucker for hearing a deep, loud horn being blown as some sort of last rally for death, or hopefully glory. It's probably also not a coincidence that this happens at the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep. Note to self, dwarves can really blow hard if they want to. The granted temporary hit points really do add to the feeling of being on the defensive and add something a bit unique to the fight. And then there's the fight itself, which sees waves of goblins, ogres, spiders and a drow throw themselves, or at times each other, at the defenses. You have to balance fighting the spiders that teleport up immediately with fending off the incoming goblins who are trying to attack the gate, and then there are goblins who are being lobbed up onto the top of the walls, and the goblins who are self-sacrificing themselves, again just like in Helm's Deep actually, and it often feels like a desperate fight. However, the Tieflings have not been idle while they wait, and have prepared a little surprise for the assailants. I imagine one of the points of this fight is to show off how the environment can be used during the fight to your advantage, although I don't think there's any other point in the game where you're able to so comprehensively prepare the surroundings outside of using full-blown baromancy. Lastly, there is the music as well, which really puts me in an inspired mood, giving me the belief that I can actually do this and I will be the savior of the Grove. Obviously, this has been a completely subjective video. These are just my favorite fights. You tell me, what are your favorite fights in Act 1, and which are the fights that I mentioned that actually you hate, and tell me the reason you hate it. Thank you for watching and making it this far, and to all the members of my channel, and hopefully I will catch you in the next one.